Welcome back on the Leaders Who Care. As you know, we're on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every corner around the world to share their best practices and how they made it to a great success, because the how is often more important than the end result. Today, I would like to welcome Tim Ringel. Tim, a serial entrepreneur, founder of 5 companies, and a global CEO of Meet the People, a next generation advertising group challenging everything we thought we knew about how agency model should work. This isn't just another agency holding company. Meet the People is unified in one ownership structure. Teams led a global network across EMEA, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and US, managing more than 3,000 people across 68 offices. He's built multiple agency groups, led Spring Studios, Reprise Digital, and shared his vision at over 200 top industry stages from Google to United Nations. But today, Tim is not on the stage. He's on the hot seat. Tim, welcome on the Leaders Who Care.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, I love the hot seat.
Wonderful. Well, for the audience, my role today, I'll be stepping into the role of a skeptical leader, someone who's seen countless revolutions in this space fail under the weight of real world complexity. And I'll be challenging Tim with number of questions, actually. Meet the People promises radical autonomy and seamless collaboration across portfolio of agencies. But can that kind of model truly hold up under pressure of a rapid growth? Is genuine collaboration possible where agency interests inevitably clash? And is a new approach a future-proof system, or is it just another shiny structure that looks great on a pitch deck but fails up in practice? For the audience, that doesn't reflect my personal view. I'm here to challenge Tim and pressure test the bold ideas behind this model, so we can all learn what really works. But before we start the grilling, tell us what exactly your new model and Meet the People is. How is it different?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the introduction. So maybe I have to start with my entrepreneurial and life experience to come to why am I building something like this. So I was born in Germany. I grew up in an industrial town that I think Liverpool would be a great comparison in England. Coal or steel. It wasn't a very digital native city to grow up in, but I had a passion for computers and coding that got initially spiked by my parents buying me a personal computer at the age of 11 instead of a Commodore C64 that I wanted to play games. Because with a PC in Germany at the schoolyard, you really couldn't trade any games, so I had to teach myself coding. So I fell into coding. I taught myself assembler, C++, and all those beautiful things, and I had a passion for computers. So when I was 20 and in college, I started my first business, and I fell very deep into the internet, I would say, and wanted to be an entrepreneur within the internet space. And the first business model that worked out of 5 business models I tried with no money but a computer had to do with digital marketing. It was the time when Google came to Europe, basically. So in 98, 99. So I was very early, probably actually one of the first, if not the first customer of Google in Germany with my clients. So I started building a digital agency. And since that moment in time where I was 20, since today, where I'm 49, I've always been in the agency industry. And I've seen a lot of different models and tried a lot of different models, building companies, different shareholder structures, different capital structures. And each time I built a business, each time I sold it, merged it, did whatever we did with the business, I learned more about what I think a better structure could look like, right? I also worked for one of the very large holding companies for 3 years, coming here to New York City, where I live now, and saw how they operate, how they are structured, how they deal with clients and handle people. And I created the vision of Meet the People because I wanted to build a company that has the best of both of these worlds, the best of how to get excellence out of entrepreneurs, the best of how you build a for-profit company, the best of how you still can treat your people very well and decently, and the best of the professionalism I experience at very large companies, no matter if I had 3,000 people or if I was part of a 64,000 people business. So I wanted to create something that mixes those aspects in a company where I'm going to come to work every day and have fun at the same time, where I don't feel like I have to do something I don't want to do. And I'm not saying it sounds very spoiled, right? But as a founder, you have to have passion for what you do. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to actually be successful. So Meet the People is a combination of those factors. Today, we are to be 800 people who work across 12 locations in the United States and Canada. And we do everything from A to Z within the value chain of marketing and advertising for Fortune 500 companies, but also for mid-sized companies. And my model differentiates itself because we acquire companies, but the people who sell their businesses to us become equity partners within my group. So it's a unitary shareholder structure, but not a unitary brand structure, meaning we keep the companies the way we acquired them and try to enhance them with mentorship, better infrastructure, better capital structure, more capital spent in innovation, and ultimately by successful companies who are successful for a reason. And that is usually the people who work there and the clients they work for. So it's a different take on a model than what we've seen out there. And yeah, that is how I'm trying to challenge the market.
Thank you for sharing that. And now we'll dive into some of those more challenging questions. First of all, I'm impressed. I mean, you are pitching a bold, next generation, almost utopian model through agency, autonomy, shared ownership, no central authority. But let's be honest, when everyone wants a piece, who is really in charge in that situation?
Well, I think different to a country where democracy can work because everybody has a vote, right? And you're thinking ideally generational. In a business, sometimes you do ultimately have to make a call at some point, right? You can't leave it only to democracy. So I've learned, this is my fifth company, and I've learned that I never gonna find the perfect model because the model how to operate a business depends a lot on its scale, nature, investor base, market sentiment, and obviously the industry it's in and the disruption the industry goes through. So what I tell my team always is, listen, we're building the plane while we are flying it. All I know is I want to do it better than what I've experienced and seen out there, especially with a lot of the disruption that's coming our way, as it has always done in the last 25 years. I've been in the industry for 30 years. There's always been technology enabled or triggered disruption. And we're going to have to change the model how companies in my sector, especially agencies, operate to actually make it good places for people to want to work and not just become, another asset class in a P&L. So I've designed a model that I think operationally works pretty well to a certain scale. And that's also where my ambition comes in to not go above that scale, because I do believe that the larger a company gets, the more political, more hierarchy, and more, I call them paper pushers, but less people who actually understand what the company is doing going to be in charge. So in my experience, as I've built businesses from two people in a basement in Germany up to running companies with 3,000 people and 68 offices around the globe, I found that sweet spot to be somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 people. And I'm happy to explain how I think that model can still work, where 3,000 people is still a lot of people when you think internationally. And how do you, rally people behind a vision, rally people behind the idea of them having a say, even though, you have to sometimes make strategic decisions that might not be comfortable for an individual, but be comfortable for hundreds of people, right? So yeah, it's not a democracy. It can't be a democracy, but we're trying to get as close as we can.
You mentioned something about up to certain size, so you really specified something important here. But in high growth environments, isn't it inevitable that collaboration becomes chaos and autonomy gets diluted? Is that really the?
Yes, yes, but no, Because if you look at high scale tech companies, Google, Amazon, and I'm not saying they're good players in general at large for our economy necessarily, but what I'm saying is the way how they manage fast scale and individuality is very small teams that execute against something very specific. If you read how Bezos set up Amazon with teams with a maximum of 14 people, right? In a corporation that is one of the biggest employers on the planet. Of course, lots of these people work in warehouses. So let's say they are not part of the corporate staff, but even the tens of thousands of people who work in Amazon corporate, they're still kind of cut into small groups that can make decisions without having to go to 15 superiors, right? So you can keep an entrepreneurial spirit at a certain scale. I think I don't want to be what Amazon is, because ultimately, you're going to have to destroy others to succeed. That's not our mission here, but I try to keep teams considerably small, to be able to give people the feeling of being able to kind of define their own destiny and keep entrepreneurial spirit alive.
So, what is the ideal size then?
Yeah, and that it depends a little bit on the industry, trade, what are you doing, right? Because certain things you can't do if you don't have the right people and the right amount of people. It gets tricky, right? So in my organization, we have around, we're buying another company right now. So I think that deal is going to be announced in 2, 3 days. So we're going to be around 800 people. So my companies, and I have 10 brands within my group, each company is between 20 people and 150 people. And the real sweet spot of these individual companies is usually around 60 to 70 people. Because in an organization where you have 70 people, the people who lead the organization still know everybody. They still have a relationship with everybody, and you don't need a third hierarchical layer to run the organization. You have usually a leadership layer, let's call it the C-suite, and then you have kind of like department heads, but they're still in the weeds. So that is a very healthy structure to create a high-performing team, because there's no one there just pushing paper, right? Everybody is somehow involved in a client, somehow involved in the product, somehow involved in delivering services to clients or the solutions to clients, and nobody can hide. That's a very healthy structure that, from my perspective, is kind of the Goldilocks zone of a company size.
Hmm. It's very interesting, that you looking at this, you grow to 3,000 people. You have done that, and you with the ambition to double the 800 strong agency number. How do you prevent
Yeah.
the collective group culture from slowly eroding that
Yeah.
independence?
Yeah. So I'm doing things different than others, right? So usually when somebody buys companies and rolls them together, there is a lot of ego in the room in terms of, oh, this has to be my company, right? I have to be the star on stage, and these are my thousands of people. Like I honestly couldn't care less, right, about those ego things, because I've successfully built businesses and I sold businesses and I merged businesses. I've done most of these things already. So it's not about me. It's not about I have to be on stage. So when we are building this company, we do have a holding brand, basically the brand that owns 100% of the organization, plus obviously all the shareholders. That means the individuals who are part of Meet the People own a portion of our group. But each company that joins us keeps their brand, keeps their DNA, keeps their culture, and we are just providing infrastructure. Meaning, if you're a 30, 40 people company, you usually don't really have super sophisticated HR career passing, HR tools, financial tools, ERP, like all those things that cost a lot of money. You usually don't invest into, because you can't spare that money, or you can't actually spare money into innovation. We spend millions of dollars developing AI-enabled products that are our proprietary products. But the group spends this money and all the companies in the group can use it, while each company keeps their individual identity. So we bought a company, for example, in New Hampshire, in New England, on the East Coast. They're still the same people. They're still the same brand. They're still doing the same thing. They're just getting way more business because now they're part of a larger group and everybody loves them and everybody loops them into opportunities with clients, right? The same goes for a business we bought in Missouri, right? Same thing. They keep their brand. They keep their leadership team. They still do what they do, what they did when we acquired them, but they're doing more now because we have other clients coming in throughout the group as well, and so on and so forth. So it's unusual for a company to keep all those DNAs and cultures and brands alive, because there's usually always someone with an ego and said, "This is mine. I want to run it the way how I want to run it. And our thesis, my thesis and my leadership team's thesis is, well, these people probably know much better than us because I'm not from New Hampshire. I'm not from Missouri. I'm not from Minneapolis. I'm not from Chicago. I'm from Germany. Who am I going to tell how to run a business in the US, right? So we really respect these entrepreneurs who have built these businesses successfully and successful enough for us wanting to acquire them. Why would we change it? Only enhance it, but not change it.
Why would they want to sell in the first place if they're successful and they're going well?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
this, especially if they are, would they want to build it themselves? Knowing the
Hmm.
U.S. entrepreneurial culture.
Yeah. So the beauty is that I've been in their seat. So I built my first business. I started my first business in a basement in an industrial town in Germany with my co-founder, and we were two people and two PCs, two computers, right? And we grew it to 150 people, and then we sold the company. And in that process, we ask ourselves multiple times, should we sell? Should we keep it? And multiple times we decided against selling it because it was our baby. We loved it. It was beautiful. We knew everybody and so on and so forth. But at a certain moment in your life, um, especially with life changes, let's say you have kids, you want to retire, there's life moments where founders ask themselves, am I risking too much? Do I put all my eggs in one basket? Um, am I always going to be so innovative? Do my clients change? Am my clients going to outgrow me, or do I outgrow my clients? So every entrepreneur has those doubts, and eventually um, they come to a point where they're saying like, you know what? I can't learn by myself anymore. I've been building this, call it to 50 or 100 people. I really would like to be with like-minded people who I can trust, who are not my competitors, who I can't trust. And a lot of people sell because of those reasons. And they sell to us because they get exactly that. Like-minded people, they can stay on if they want. They can assume different roles, they can learn something new, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of people who are selling into our group because they still want to stay in the industry and still want to run their business, but they want a little more comfort and diversification in terms of their wealth. At the same time, they want to learn from other entrepreneurs who might have built bigger or smarter or smaller or more innovative companies.
So it comes down to not just the end result. Basically, it comes down to who are the people I'm gonna do it with. Basically, that's like really because
Yes,
I
exactly.
can learn, I can trust. Because I've seen that very often. Entrepreneurship could be very lonely, very difficult, very um, really frustrating in moments. And but if you enjoy the, the team around you, the people around you, you're much more likely to get over any hurdles and challenges ahead.
Totally.
So what you're
Absolutely.
saying is that you have something quite unique, bringing that kind of community of leaders and best practices where you can actually leverage each other and grow together and really
Correct. And I
value-minded,
think
maybe unlike-minded, but value-minded kind of really entrepreneurship or leaders that come together.
And I think it resonates because I've been in their shoes many times in my life. So you're not talking when somebody talks to us about, hey, I'm looking for a solution for my business, I might want to partner with someone. I first talk about my experience and I ask them, why do you want to sell? Because if your revenues are strong, your clients are strong, all the things you put into your presentation to us, if that is all true, I wouldn't sell it. Right? So what is the real reason? And then usually, because I can tell them, I've been in your shoes. I've had a striving business, great margin, was all fantastic. But I came to a moment in my life where it's not like, okay, I want to get out of my hometown. I want to build a family. I want financial comfort. At the same time, I want to challenge myself, right? So there's always a reason why people consider selling a business, and all of them tell you the business is going amazing. So the natural question is, well, if it's going so great,
Mhm. Well,
why
well,
do you want to change it,
yeah,
right?
exactly. What's wrong?
Exactly.
They say,
But it's not. It doesn't need to be wrong with the business. Sometimes it's just moments in people's lives because in the end we're all humans. and we all have desires, or we have problems to deal with, or we have life situations that make us reconsider.
No, really helpful to share, and thank you for providing that insight. Founders have equity and ownership in your group, but how much real operation control do they have? So, and
A ton. Yeah.
how does it work? Basically, you have a holding, but then
Yeah.
they have like majority, minority. How does that work with the founders?
Yeah. I mean, so number one, each of the founders. So we bought 9 brands so far. We're buying a 10th brand now. All of the founders are still within our group. Number one, and they pick how much operational responsibility they want to have. Like, for example, one of our founders started the business 40 years ago. So obviously now he's in his 60s, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to deal with HR things, and I don't want to deal with all this, but I'm really good at this. Can I just do this? And we're like, yeah, sure, go ahead. I mean, I respect anyone who's built a company for that amount of time, and is still standing. So people pick what they want their responsibility to be operationally. So lots of them still run their business themselves, right? But maybe we mentor them and like, well, if you want to go from 40 people to 60 people, you know what? You kind of need a head of operations in the future. Why don't you consider interviewing some people who can help you build better infrastructure for your organization, right? So that's what our role is. I always I kind of look at it a bit like a sports team where I'm the coach, and the players are all very, very strong, but they have a certain superpower. Some are defense, some are offense, some are on the sides. So you have to coach your team and have to make it work in sync to actually be super successful as a team, right? And I think they really, really appreciate that. Not that I know all the right answers, of course not. I'm as flawed as every other human being, right? But the coach has to challenge and maybe share experiences, and hopefully people can learn. And sometimes you have to put them on the bench and then you put them back in the game, right? So in terms of the equity structure, because we are buying companies, that does require capital. So we have a capital partner who owns a large part of the business, but all the rest of the business is owned by the individuals who are running the business, including myself, including our COO, including tens, if not nearly 100 people within the organization who own a piece of this company.
And looking at what, if you look at all the brands and the organizations you have, at what point does group strategy override individual agency priorities? Is there such a case where you have to pull the trigger and say, you know what, maybe interfere?
Well, let's ask the question a different way. What external factor could make you prioritize group strategy over individual strategy?
Yep.
Right? And that external factor is always to do with money.
Yeah.
Right? What I learned across 30 years is that you have to be very conscious of your shareholder structure when you build a business. The more misalignment you have in your shareholder structure, the more problems you're going to have, and the more pressure it's going to put on a overarching financial goal than individual performance and individual strategy. So vision and strategy completely goes out of the window if you have a non-aligned shareholder structure that's only out for money. Businesses should always be built to generate money, because otherwise they shouldn't exist, or they should be an NGO, right? So if you're a for-profit business, then your responsibility is to generate money. The question is, what is the expectation of your shareholder base against that mission, right? So I'm very conscious in how I pick the shareholder base, and that goes from my capital partner as well as from the companies we buy, because I don't want someone who's only out for the money. I love people who also want to change the industry, and they're kind of ideally in an equal balance. The only factor that can change that, if you change the shareholder structure, means you bring new capital partners in, or you IPO the company, and most bad behavior in terms of for people, because this is a podcast about good leadership, ideally, and it's in my company name, Meet the People. People are in my company name, right? So I really care about that factor. So most bad behavior is triggered by short-term point of view on capital gains, right? And the moment a company lists, you're looking at a lot of quarterly pressure, And that usually creates bad behavior. And if we have seen this a lot in tech companies who IPO'd, that from don't be evil, all of a sudden pretty evil. And the reason is that you need to service shareholders instead of servicing your people or your clients. So we're going to try to avoid that. I have run a listed company. I know how to do it. It was with around 1,000 people in Europe. I'm not shying away from it. Is it my preferred path? Maybe at some point, but we always have to be honest about how it changes the fabric of a people-oriented organization.
That's an interesting one, because to me, always businesses should exist based on solving a problem to people or community or society, and profits, of course, a byproduct of that. Of course, I am all for profit. Don't really mistake that. But also at the same time, if we just reverse what you just explained on the quarterly basis, that sometimes goes in such an extreme. And I'm all into, yes, generate profit for the shareholders, because they could be pension funds or could be
Of course.
millions of people. Pensions depend on this. But at the same time, really, how could that exist in a publicly listed structure? Is it possible, publicly listed business, to actually do both, still continue to grow and deliver on higher profits without creating the bad behaviors we've seen because of the quarterly pressure?
It works if it's still an entrepreneurial structure. You
Okay.
see it with, you see, again, I don't want to always use Amazon as an example, but you look at some of those tech leaders, and I'm not comparing myself or our company to any of those companies, right? We're by far not that scale nor that profitability. But lots of them told the markets when they IPO'd, you know what, we don't care. Like, you don't want to invest into us, don't invest into us. We're not going to post profits for a while, right? It's a famous Jeff Bezos Amazon quote, right? We're here for the long run because we want to conquer the world. We're not here to deliver quarterly results. It takes a lot of boldness from someone to say that. If you're a hired manager who is the CEO of a business who also is motivated to deliver yearly results for your cash bonus, you're never going to do that. So I think the 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 problem kicks in when the responsibility is outsourced to people who do not really care for the vision, but they only care for the profits. And it goes for shareholder pressure, but also individual motivation. So it's the combination of those two. Once you have a for-profit listed company that is run by people who are in it for profit only, then you're going to have the bad behavior.
How could you avoid that if the company is not led by an entrepreneur anymore, is passed on to a CEO, professional, let's say management, if you use that terminology, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe the incentivizing should not be on the early bonuses then. How do we
Correct.
incentivize behavior that actually
Yeah.
creates that significant long-term value and positive impact to the industry?
I don't have an answer. And here in the United States, I see an even more extreme version of what I have experienced in Europe when it comes to listed companies, right? I think there is a reason why lots of family owned businesses, large family owned businesses,
Yeah.
especially in Europe, are actually really good to their people because they do not have that pressure and they are trying to build a generational business and they live off dividends, right? And they decide every year, are we making a big leap investing, call it €1 billion, into building a new, buying a company, building a new product or whatever it is, and they forego their distributions to invest into the next generation. As a listed company, you have zero incentive to do that because you're going to get punished on the share price. And once you get punished too much, you're going to get fired. So, IPOing a business was primarily driven by lots of founders because they wanted to get fresh liquidity into the business because they raised a lot of capital and they eventually have to pay out the venture capital or PE people, right? Now we see a very different trend and we see that some of the tech companies don't even need to IPO to attract a lot of capital. And they don't need to IPO for 10 years or 15 years. Look at some of the most successful companies that are really disrupting the world right now. Lots of them, I don't think, even have an ambition to IPO, right? Because the shareholders can liquidate their stock on secondary marketplaces like Forge or Hive where you can sell equity even without listing the company, right? So there is a bit of a new generation, I think, of entrepreneurship coming. And my hope is that secondary markets for equity is going to be strong enough so it doesn't force companies to IPO. I'm not saying IPOs are bad. It has to do with what kind of company you're building and what kind of culture you're building.
When disagreements arise between agencies or between agencies in group leadership, how how are conflicts resolved without the central authority clashing with the founder's independence?
Well,
Surely
there's
there's
always
like
a
wide turf or undermining the group's ethos sometimes.
there's always a central authority in the end, right? So if two people fight in the sandpit, it just sometimes needs someone to remind them why we're here, and that's probably my role in the organization. But keep in mind that the beauty is the people who run those companies within my organization, they have equity in the group. So I
Yeah.
always explain this. For example, let's say one company wins a client and is reluctant to open the door to another company. I always tell them, listen, if the other company is successful and this client spends $1 million with the other company, you have to do nothing, but the value of your equity is going to increase just for opening the door, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most important, one of the pushbacks I got in the beginning of building this model, where you leave a lot of independence to the individual companies, is they didn't trust each other because it's basically think about it when you joined a new school, right? And all of a sudden these are all new kids in your class. You never met these people. Like you don't know who to trust. You think some people are gonna be cool and you're gonna be want to be associated with them, but then you quickly realize they're not your people and you're going to switch to whatever your group of people is. It's similar when you put these businesses together in a time frame of like 3 to 4 years, that they're all very proud of themselves and they do a great job, but they're not yet ready to really, go deep in a relationship. So they don't trust each other until, and this is the secret, until you put them into situations where they have to work together. And that is usually when we pitch on new business. When we pitch on new business, these people go in the trenches and they work out a fantastic pitch. And the best lesson they can learn is not winning the client. Because I always say it, you get war wounds, right? You get cut and you get hurt and you bleed together. And then all of a sudden there is a trust bond. And after that, everything becomes easier. It's because humans are, uh, we are relationship people. We are people who want to trust the people around us to then give them what's most dear to us. And to an agency leader, what's most dear to them is their own people and is their client relationships. And we have seen that probably after the first 3 years, it's become extremely easy to bring people together and find consensus because they have bled together pitching clients and not winning, and they have bled together pitching clients and winning large accounts. And that just creates a beautiful culture between the companies. Yeah, so we don't fall into the situation where we have a lot of arguments. Everybody understands that, hey, sometimes I'm going to have to catch a bullet to make someone else happy because this client is really important for them. So I'm going to work maybe not making a ton of money on this particular project. And next time I can ask the same favor from them. So that's what I call an entrepreneurial long-term structure where people do not think about, oh, this is the months, and this month I'm going to do this, and this quarter I'm going to do that. No, everybody is in it for the long run, and everybody understands that, oh, I have a certain amount of brownie points and favors I'm going to give and I'm going to receive. And if I'm a good citizen, I'm going to receive. If I'm a bad citizen, I'm not going to get anything, and this group is not going to help me much.
Do you see situations where, obviously, in a flat ownership structure, that you have gridlock? Who owns the final call? In those, how do you avoid those decision making really gridlocks or passive consent?
Well, we haven't had gridlock also because each of the companies we acquire do not compete with the other company in their services. So they overlap sometimes, but only on the periphery, not in their core. So each company has a superpower, and that superpower is really unchallenged from the other company. nobody can do it within our group. Nobody's going to do that particular service or job as good as one particular company. We're very conscious of that because conflict only exists if they think they're competing with each other. But if they're compatible with each other, even though they might have a different take on things or quality standards or experience or industry exposure, they're still going to respect each other's voice because they're not competing. So I think that helps a lot. So we don't get into gridlock situations, but if we would get into a gridlock situation, it is my role as CEO of the group and founder of the group to say, guys, okay, this is not going to work. Let's go this direction. Let's test it out. If it's wrong, you can call me on it, and then we go your direction. But from my perspective, looking across all those businesses and seeing how we're doing and seeing what we are deciding and seeing what kind of clients we're winning and what we're working on, this is the best decision to my knowledge. Yeah.
You talk about superpowers. I kind of like that terminology. Some people don't like it, but let's talk about some of the superpowers of your companies. How do they complement? Can you give an example of a few complementary superpowers that you have?
It's actually very easy if we're honest about it. So we have a company that is extremely good in brand architecture, design, brand strategy. So they work for clients like IBM, Google, and many, many large brands, Fortune 500 companies. And these companies call on them because they're known to be some of the best designers in the United States, okay? And the company has been around for 40 years. So they're really good at that. That's an absolute superpower that none of our other companies could probably aspire to achieving those kind of names and those kind of projects, right? At the same time, they do know that they're not going to be the best when you talk about, hey, how should this brand live on Google in search marketing, or how should this brand live on TikTok, or how should this brand think about their data strategy? That's within the complexity of advertising and marketing, there's probably 12 to 15 different traits that are so fragmented and specific that you want to have a smooth handover with another partner, but you do not really want to go down into the rabbit hole. I grew up in performance marketing, search, social, data analytics. That's where I come from. That's how my brain works. But I can't challenge our designers. I have no clue how they're doing this beautiful work, if I'm really honest about it. It's not my superpower. So I remind people of, if you go to any agency on the planet and you ask them, what does your agency do? They're going to say, I'm a full service agency. In their bucket of space, they are a full service agency. But in the bigger scheme of things, of the entire engagement funnel to a consumer or in a B2B environment, there is at least 15 different traits that a brand touches across the journey from getting from a creative idea down to an actual execution and the measurement of it, right? And my ambition is to find agencies who fit into this entire engagement funnel and the re-engagement after, right? And have their superpower there. It's a little bit, I always compare it a little bit with the Avengers, right? You're not going to call on the Hulk if you don't need the muscle. So, but you call on the Hulk if you need the muscle. So the Avengers get together, and we have clients that 6 or 7 of our agencies work on that client together across all those traits. And we have clients who only want to work with one of them, and they're very happy with it, right? So we want to use both. We want to use the individual superheroes and superpowers, but we also want to bring the Avengers together when we need them.
You probably not list all of the 12 to 15 expertise, but what are the main ones that in a B2B you mentioned, and is that different to B2C, that you should be aware of? What are kind of key expertise
so
the agency?
Our main pillars is creative, commerce, and media. And within those, each of these areas have another, 6 to 9 traits. Creative goes anywhere from strategy, brand architecture, design, logo design, into content development, campaign development, into production, and so on and so forth. Commerce goes into experiential. I call commerce. So creative is really upper funnel. What emotion do you want to transport as a brand, no matter if you have a B2C client or a B2B client, right? And how does that emotion is going to get translated into an asset that this audience is going to consume eventually down the journey to engage with your product or your services? Commerce is when a customer touches the product, right? And media is when a customer learns about the product. That's how you could basically describe it. So within each of those pieces, we have, as I said, 6 to 9 specialties. And again, I want to cover all of them. But commerce for us, we probably touch millions of people every month with products of our clients. No matter if we work for LG Electronics, we work for LVMH, we help those brands to sell products to customers who physically or digitally want to touch the product. And on the media side, that's our commerce space. And on the media side, we do everything from, traditional media you would see on TV, print, radio, billboards, to digital marketing and programmatic search, social, basically the entire spectrum of the very, very fragmented space in media. And in media alone, you have probably 20 different channels you can play with, right? And that means you need someone who really understands new formats, let's say in-stream formats, right? OTT, programmatic out of home, digital out of home screens, right? So you need specialists who really understand those mediums to then be able to suggest to a client, well, for you, it makes maybe no sense to go into linear TV. You should really be on streaming services because it fits to the sub audience of consumers you want to inform about your product. Right.
Many have tried like alternative agency group models but failed. What makes you confident that your equity-based independent ownership model can succeed long term and be a blueprint for others?
Well, number one, experience, but there's more experienced people than me. So right now in the Western world, means between Europe and the Americas, there's around 30 new generation agency groups who are trying different models. Meet the People is one of them, but there's probably 29 plus others who are trying the same thing at different scale with different models. Some of them are very industry focused. They only do luxury, let's call it, as an industry. Others really believe in a unified brand strategy where they buy companies, strip away the brand, and then roll it into one group to make it look more integrated. Others think it's smart to go public very quickly, right, and allow them to raise more capital. Others think they should be geographically super diverse. We are very much focused on the US and Canada to keep it pretty simple because the markets are really big. Others strive for being, in 10 markets right away. So it's just different founders and CEOs have different visions on how their company is going to differentiate enough to make it a success towards clients, because without clients, no money, without money, no talent, without talent, no company, right? I think based on my experience having done all of this before, right? Starting my own business, selling it, doing a reverse takeover of the buyer, running a listed company in Europe with Middle Eastern and Asian offices, coming to America, building a company in America, up to 3,000 people, having seen all of that, I have come up with a model that I believe is probably going to work best. And that's just my individual thesis, to be very honest. And it might be that somebody stands up one day and says like, see, you could have done even better. I'm like, okay, but I think we did fine. That's good enough for me.
Very curious to see what would be really the future of this, especially taking into account the AI. Everybody talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
We say some of the biggest revolution in 2 centuries, and really we shall see. So what agencies will be left if AI is taking over? The real truth is that we're probably not seeing the real threat of AI.
My industry has been called dead many, many times in the last 20 years because people misunderstand 2 things. They misunderstand that in the end, we are all humans, right? We actually do want to work. We do want to do things. We do want to create. We do want to build companies. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. Otherwise, society would have taken care of us and we would have voted as democracies for a society where we get a general income, where it's not about you as an individual. It's not about a capitalist goal, right? If society would be like that, I would say, yes, AI can take over, no problem, right? But society doesn't work like that. Society always breeds ambitious people who want to build new things. And especially in my industry, a lot of people are very passionate about what they do. So I've heard those fears many times when the internet started, when Google came into the play, when Facebook took over, when Amazon started taking over. I'm honestly not scared of AI at all. I think it's going to make our life extremely interesting. And it's another evolution. I think it's a fundamental shift, just like the internet was. because it's going to touch every industry on the planet, and it's going to change how the fabric of jobs, but it's not going to make human jobs irrelevant. I think actually the opposite. So nevertheless, in my industry, we have dealt with machine learning and AI for 15 years. Now, everybody's talking about AI now, but it has been around a long time, because if we're honest, the people who invented what we're working with today, most of them are bred out of the large tech companies that have disrupted the advertising industry first because they needed to monetize. And I predict that all those beautiful free AI tools and all the beautiful, like, oh, this is also unbiased, is going to be monetized with advertising at some point. Because if you raise $60 billion, you're eventually going to have to give that money back plus. And the only way to give it back is you're going to have to monetize your user base. But to monetize your user base, first you want to have a freemium model, because you want to lure people in, become ideally a monopoly, just like Google did, right, when they came into the market. And then you're going to start charging people. I hear all these celebrations of like, oh, I'm a startup. I paid $20,000 a month to OpenAI, but I only had 3 people. Otherwise, I would have had to have 15 people. So I'm saving so much money. Well, what's going to happen when everybody uses OpenAI and everybody has not hired those people? You think the price is going to stay on 20 grand a month? No, the price is going to be 100 grand a month, because once they are monopoly enough, they're going to increase the price. So one of the main layers of monetizing freemium products is advertising. So I see it as a massive opportunity. The fabric of the work that people are going to do within certain parts of the advertising industry, that is going to change. But the fact is, the advertising industry is always going to be around, because consumers always should be informed about new products, and there will always going to be jobs. They might look slightly different.
Well, final question. Thank you so much. You've been really helpful with those insights. I'd like to ask you something about that is really useful to any founder right now or leader that are trying to build more autonomous models and founder-led cultures, even with larger groups. Sometimes that's possible. What would be one principle or practice or advice from your model that they can apply today without necessarily changing their whole structure?
It depends what size of business we're talking about. Like a founder who's just starting off needs totally different advice to somebody who has 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people. Those companies need very different advice.
Let's say from 20 to 50, like just starting to grow from that, made it, maybe not a startup, but just like, because that's quite a critical 10, 20 people sizing to 50 plus. It's like quite a step.
Yeah. I think an important one is going to be the question of promoting inside or hiring from the outside, right? I mean, presume that a young company with 20 to 30 people already is adopting technology the way they should, right? Presuming that. Otherwise, probably my push would be, think about how technology should change the fabric of your company and your operating system, because otherwise you're not going to be able to compete in the future. But that goes kind of for every business. Just smaller businesses have to have the advantage of being able to implement technology much quicker and more agile than bigger businesses. So it's a competitive advantage. So let's presume that business already has that point of view. Then it's all about the people, right? And when it's about the people, a lot of smaller companies fall into the trap of promoting from the inside, instead of sometimes jumping into the deep end of the pool and doing the scary thing of maybe hiring someone who's not homebred to get completely new ideas and shake up the system a little bit. It's very scary for a founder to do that, and lots of them are only forced by their capital partners, venture capital, to actually do it. But it's very healthy, because if you only promote from the inside, and I'm not saying people who don't deliver shouldn't be promoted, of course, but if you only promote from the inside, you're breeding the same ideas and the same behaviors. You sometimes need to shake up behavior to actually be able to innovate and remind yourself, hey, maybe the product you've been developing for 2 years doesn't actually have a great market fit. Maybe you should think about this a little different. So it sometimes makes sense to shake it up. And I've tried to do that in my first business, and it was always very complicated. But in the end, it made us much better.
Wonderful. Extremely helpful, Tim. And I'm curious, literally, just from my heart, one additional question here for you is: if you had unlimited power, unlimited resources, what would be your dream of more caring, more better world? What's one thing that you would love to change or see happen?
I mean, I look at it from a business perspective, right? Because I don't think I can change. You can influence human behavior, but somehow society builds itself around the culture of a country to an extent, and I think it's not in my power to change the culture of a country. So, from a business perspective, if you would have unlimited resource and unlimited power, I think I would love where probably 60% of the resources could be dedicated to helping to change the world, right? But lots of the people who try to do that, I mean, this is all the tech billionaires who made their money in 10 years and then have another, what is it, 40 years to actually build their vision. They get a lot of criticism for it because it is, and that's why I'm bringing together human behavior and society into what an entrepreneur could actually do. So the problem is that because of society, and I'm talking about me being here in New York City in an American work culture that is extremely capitalistic, right? Where people like America, we know this. It's a cliche, but it is really a cliche that is true. The U.S. work culture is extremely capitalistic and very motivated monetarily, right? So it is very difficult for people to step out of thinking about the individual opportunity and their immediate circle of people. Once you step outside into the next circle, they might care. If you step into the second or third circle, it's extremely abstract to them. Someone suffering in the other side of the world is extremely abstract to them, right? And they do not want to compromise. Society and individuals are struggling a lot in compromising their own happiness and pleasures for something good that could happen on the other side of the planet that they have really no relationship to. It's extremely abstract to the human mind. So a lot of people who have this power, have the money, have the power, have the influence, they're trying to make generational changes, right? Move, for example, out of fossil fuel into sustainable fuels. On a day-to-day basis, what the consumer cares about, oh, this is more expensive for me. I don't want it, right? Because it impacts their wallet, it impacts their vacation, it impacts what food they put on the table at home. So the problem is that big vision and generational thinking always going to collide with probably 90% of the population who are struggling in some extent, right? Or who want to improve their lifestyle. So you don't get a lot of love for generational thinking, but it's the one thing that I think is going to be extremely important for humanity. And it's mistaken sometimes with narcissism and egocentricity when the only way, and every entrepreneur knows this, the only way you get shit done is if you ignore some of those things, right? And um, because people in the end they think about the individual wealth, pleasure, needs rather than societal needs. And this is where society ends up to be what it is today, right? With a debt burden that our children can't pay back ever, where governments are elected that are extremely interesting without getting political, because people think about their own food at home and their own wallet. And this is how some governments came to power in the last 100 years that were really, really bad for society, right? Um, so yeah, it's a very philosophical way to think about the world, but with unlimited power, I think I would try to do something generational, but you don't get a lot of appreciation for it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim, for the work you do, for really making an impact, for being a leaders who care. And if anybody wants to get in touch, whether this is a founder that may be interested in your model or
Yeah.
inspired by your vision, or whether this is a client that really may be interested to talk to you or anyone else in between, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you're definitely going to find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. It's linkedin.com/Tim Ringel. Very easy to find. But you can also email me at tim@meetthepeople.com. and yeah, just reach out and, have a conversation. I try to always make time as much as I can with anyone who, needs help, or I can bring any value to the table.
Wonderful. Tim, all the best. Blessings to your team and the work you do. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the time.